Hi, in this video I'm going to explain about Kingdom Protista. So under Kingdom Protista, the learning outcomes state the unique characteristics of Protista, state the classification of Protista based on the unique feature which divided into phylum Algae and phylum Protozoa. And then students should be able to explain the importance of Protista. So all protista are eukaryotic organisms. Their cell organizations are diverse, mostly unicellular, but there are also protista which live in colonies, unicellular colony, and also there are protists that is simple multicellular. Okay, the mode of nutrition. For mode of nutrition, it is not about what the nutrients that they take, but how do they obtain the nutrients. The nutrient. For example, photoautotroph. Autotroph are known as organisms that can produce their own food by means of photosynthesis. So in Protista, there are photoautotroph, which means the autotroph harness the light energy and convert it into a chemical energy. Then heterotroph are organisms that cannot produce their own food, meaning that they cannot undergo photosynthesis. So the protista that are heterotroph, obtain their nutrients by ingestive, like protozoa, or absorptive, fungus like protists. Because ingestive means you have to digest the food internally inside your body. For example, human being are heterotroph and obtain the nutrients by ingestion. So we have to swallow our food, and then our food will be digested in our digestive system. While for absorptive, like fungi, they don't have the organs that can digest the food internally, so they produce enzyme outside of their body and digest the substance outside of their body, and then when the substance are broken down into smaller particles, or smaller particles such as glucose or a vitamin, so then they will absorb the substances for their benefits. And there are also protists, that is mixotroph. Mixotroph means they have the combination of the ability to produce their own food and also be able to ingest or absorb this nutrient, like heterotroph. So they are both autotroph and heterotroph. Protista can be found in almost any place with water or any moist area, such as oceans, ponds, lakes, dam soil. For example, after rain, there will be some puddles form, lopa air and puddles. If the puddles stay there for a few days, we will be able to find some protista living in the puddles. Sebab dia adalah kawasan yang lembap dan okay, Protista as symbionts, meaning that they live or inhabiting the body fluids, tissues or cells of the host. Maknanya, meaning that they live in another organism or getting benefits from another organism. So there are two types of relationship involved, which is mutualism and parasitism. So mutualism means it is an interaction between two species that gives benefit to both species. For example, dinoflagellates. Dinoflagellate is a protist that gets the nourishment or nutrients, or give nutrients to the coral polyps that build reefs. Okay, they nourish coral polyps that build reefs, and then they will get benefit from the coral polyp itself. While parasitism is when one organism, only one organism that lives in the body or the host obtains the benefits. The host does not get any benefit from the parasites. The example is Plasmodium species that causes malaria disease. In terms of reproduction, Protista can reproduce either sexually or asexually. So from this diagram, you can see that for sexual reproduction, the process is known as conjugation, which involve the combination of two sets of chromosomes. While for asexual reproduction, the process is known as binary fission. Kingdom Protista are divided into two types of groups, algae and protozoa. Usually, algae is also known as plant-like protozoa. Plant-like Protista. So algae are divided into two phylum. Two phyla. Phyla is the plural for phylum. The first one is Chlorophyta and the second algae is Phaeophyta. While protozoa divided into four phyla includes Euglenophyta, Rhizopoda, Celiophora, and Apicomplexa. Algae, because Protista are all eukaryotic, of course algae are eukaryotic. Algae are eukaryotic. They are autotrophs, commonly have photosynthetic pigments in plastids because they need the pigments to harness the light energy. And algae mostly lives in aquatic environments such as ocean, lakes, ponds, and any other moist habitats. They are diverse in structure, meaning we can find a unicellular algae and also simple multicellular algae. Let's look at Chlorophyta. The example of Chlorophyta is Chlamydomona species. And for Phaeophyta, the example is Fucus species. Chlorophyta is known as green algae because they appear green, while Phaeophyta is known as brown algae because they appear brown. Chlamydomona species are unicellular green algae with two flagella. Okay, this structure is the flagella. Mostly live in freshwater, such as ponds and lakes, and they have pear shape and also presence of cell wall. It also a very distinctive features that presence in Chlamydomona species is the large cup-shaped chloroplast. So the large cup-shaped chloroplast is the cup shape. The photosynthetic pigments available in the chloroplast are chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. The two flagella helps in their locomotion. Locomotion means their motility, the ability to move. So it helps propel the chlamydomonas for them to move towards the light. It has a red light sensitive eye spot or called stigma that detect changes in light intensity. They need the light, so they need to find the light. And they also possess contractile vacuoles and also other organelles such as mitochondria and Golgi body. So Chlamydomona species can reproduce asexually and sexually. Eye spot. This is eye spot on the chloroplast. The pyrenoid and the starch grains, the cell walls, and the flagellum. This is the life cycle. You don't have to memorize the life cycle, but take notes that Chlamydomonas can live, can reproduce sexually or asexually. Phaeophyta, the example is Fucus species. The shape is called thallus. So thallus includes stem-like stipe. Kalau dalam pokok, in plant we call the structure as stem. So stipe is a stem-like structure that gives support to the Ficus species. And then they have blade. Blade is the leaf-like structure, and then it has root-like holdfast. Root-like ni maksudnya fungsi dia macam akar. Pertama memberi give them a steady stand, steady stand, anchoring them to the strata, to the rock. So dia akan melekat pada batu ataupun tanah. Mereka dalam gambar ni macam pada batu. And also they have a dichotomous branching for their blade. Dichotomous branching, I will show the structure later in the next slide. Also they have air-filled bladder for buoyancy to float freely, and most seaweeds, Phaeophyta ni kita punya yang biasa kita jumpa adalah seaweed, rumpai laut. Ada kalau Fucus species ni dia anchored to the rock or to the any hard strata. Tapi ada juga seaweed yang dia suspended atau terapung. Jadi they need the buoyancy. Even the Fucus species, kalau air pasang, they need to dia nak kena tegak kan, dia nak kena bila air ada tu dia akan tegak. So for them to be able to stand or straight or appear buoyant, buoying ataupun terapung ataupun tegak dalam air tu, they need the buoyancy. So they need the air-filled bladder. Jadi kalau dia tak melekat pada tanah pun ataupun batu, dia perlu terapung dekat permukaan air. So they need the buoyancy ability. So this is what we call as the bladder, air bladder, and this is the dichotomous branching. Yang ni. This one, dichotomous branching. So this is the dichotomous branching. Fucus species store their food in the form of laminarin and mannitol. Their photosynthetic pigments are chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, and fucoxanthin. Ataupun nama pigments di bawah fucoxanthin yang banyak pada Fucus species adalah phaeophytin. Itu nama dia Phaeophyta. Kalau chlorophyta tadi dia ada chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. This is the differences. This table shows differences between phyla in algae between chlorophyta and Phaeophyta. Clearly, chlorophyta, the dominant photosynthetic pigments are chlorophyll A and B, while Phaeophyta, the pigments are fucoxanthin. While the food storage of chlorophyta are starch, for Phaeophyta is laminarin and mannitol, and the cell organization are very different between these two phyla. The shape and also their habitat. Phaeophyta usually can be found also in the ocean, while Chlorophyta mostly are freshwater. Okay, protozoa, another group of Protista, which usually related. People usually relate protozoa as animal like Protista. dia lebih menyerupai haiwan, sebab alga, manakala alga tadi lebih menyerupai tumbuh-tumbuhan. Okay, kenapa? Because mostly are heterotroph. Protozoa mostly are heterotroph. So protozoa, all protozoa are considered as unicellular eukaryotic. So they don't have tissues, they lack of cell wall, and they are heterotroph Protista. Live in any habitat where water are available. Includes body of organism. The classification, as I have mentioned before, there are 4 phyla. So let's look at each phylum. Euglenophyta, the example is Euglena species. The shape is spindle shape. The end of the shape is um, not sharp, kita panggil dia hujung runcing ya. So it has eye spot that's sensitive to light and help direct them towards light. This ability is called photosynthesis. And then it has pellicle, which is a protein band beneath the plasma membrane and provides strength and flexibility. They don't have cell wall. Pyrenoid, which helps in synthesis of starch. Euglena species has contractile vacuole, which helps to regulate water intake and water output. So it can help in removing excessive water. The flagellum, there is a short flagellum, second flagellum, and the main flagellum here helps in locomotion. In terms of modes of nutrition, Euglena species, Euglenophyta, are mixotroph. So because they have chloroplast, so they can undergo photosynthesis. While in another way, if there is no sunlight, they can also obtain nutrients by ingesting other organisms. You can find the video that shows the Euglena eating another microorganism in the YouTube. Okay, next is Rhizopoda. The example is amoeba species. Amoeba has contractile vacuole that has similar function with the Euglena species, which regulate excessive water. Pseudopodium. The structure of pseudopodium in amoeba helps them in locomotion and feeding, helps them in their movement and also feeding. So pseudopodium, pseudo means false, podium means leg. So they have a false leg or hand lah. Okay. This is the diagram that shows how amoeba engulf the other particles or other organism and digest them as their food. This is what we call heterotrophic. So they obtain nutrients from other organism. Celiophora, from the word celio at the beginning, the early part of the phylum. Celio comes from the word cilia. Cilia is a structure here surrounding the Paramecium species. So cilia are important for locomotion, the motility of the Paramecium. Paramecium species has contractile vacuole that helps removing excessive water. They also have oral groove that facilitate ingestion, and the waste are expelled via anal pore. Paramecium also they have a very unique characteristics. They have two types of nucleus that does not present in other other protozoa. They have micronucleus, which control reproduction, and macronucleus, which control metabolism and growth. Phylum Apicomplexa, the example is Plasmodium species. Apicoplast means non-photosynthetic plastic. So, Plasmodium species cannot undergo photosynthesis because they does not have photosynthetic pigment. And they also lack specific structure for locomotion, meaning that they cannot move. They live as a parasite, and they sebagai parasite meaning they live in a host and get benefits from the host. So you can read this table in your lecture notes that summarize the differences or the characteristics of each of the phyla in protozoa, each phylum in protozoa, in terms of shape, the locomotion, the nucleus, and the contractile support. Let's look at importance of Protista. Protista involved in there are six importances of Protista. You can see here carbon dioxide fixation, food source, eutrophication, red tide, human health, and sewage treatment. So let's look at the details of each importance. Roles in carbon dioxide fixation means that they involve in the carbon cycle by means of undergoing photosynthesis. Okay, meaning that because they can fix the light energy and convert it into the they can undergo photosynthesis, so they fix the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and convert it into carbohydrate. Because algae contain photosynthetic pigments. Ni protista kalau yang roles in carbon dioxide fixation involve protista which has photosynthetic pigments such as Chlorophyta and also Euglenophyta under protozoa. Also, protista can be food source, can be a source of food. For example, chlorella. Chlorella species is known as green algae. Is a food source for zooplankton. Okay, green algae is the phytoplankton, while zooplankton is the first consumer that eat on the phytoplankton. Jadi kalau dalam tasik, dalam laut punya food chain, it usually starts with phytoplankton and phytoplankton eaten by zooplankton. Okay, plankton ada dua jenis. Phyto is the producer, phytoplankton is the producer, which is the chlorella. Example is chlorella species, and zooplankton is the primary consumer. Okay, the next importance of protista is eutrophication, which is also known as algal bloom. Eutrophication is a process by which nutrients will become highly concentrated in a body of water, in the lake, in the ponds, then leads to explosive growth of algae. So, what is so bad about explosive growth of algae? If there is too much algae, the water becomes greener, and it will also reduce the oxygen content because so many algae they will also use the oxygen, and also they will because of they cover the surface of the ponds of the lake. It is impossible for the sunlight to penetrate to the bottom of the lake, so this can cause death of aquatic organisms, such as look at this diagram. So nutrients load up, excessive nutrients form fertilizers, flush into the river, and then plants flourish. This pollutant cause aquatic plant growth of algae, duckweed, and other plants. So duckweed algae layer here cover the surface of the ponds. Next, algae bloom. Oxygen is depleted. Algae bloom prevents sunlight reaching other plants, so the plants here will die, and then decomposition further deplete the oxygen. Okay, and the death of ecosystem. In the end, even the algae will not survive. Red tides. Red tides involve dinoflagellates. You can find the structure of dinoflagellates from the internet. Red tide is a population explosion of dinoflagellate, which is a unicellular protist, usually common in warm nutrient-enriched water. And dinoflagellate can change the color of the coastal water to red, brown and orange. Look at this diagram. Nampak untuk gambar memang cantik, but what are the downside of it? Some dinoflagellate species release toxin that will attack the nervous system of the fish. So it could affect us or whoever feed on the contaminated fish. Jadi kita akan dapat toksin tu kalau kita makan ikan tu. The fifth importance of Protista is human health. It causes disease, malaria disease, by parasite known as Plasmodium species. So Plasmodium species live in two hosts, the human and mosquitoes, but they can only reproduce in human. Okay, they will use the liver cell to form their spore, and then also in the blood cells until the blood cells burst, and because of uh, the blood cells are damaged. Sebab tu that was why the symptoms of malaria is having red spot on your skin. It shows that the red blood cells are damaged, burst. Kenapa burst? Sebab dia punya ni, dia punya lava dia ni. Ni adalah sporozoid dia parasite tu, dia akan duduk kat dalam liver cell, lepas tu nanti akan tersebar ke dalam sel darah. Kemudian sel darah nanti dia akan membiak dan dia akan membesar dan sel darah tu pecah. Sewage treatment is the process of removing contaminants, bahan-bahan tercemar daripada household sewage, daripada kita punya bahan buangan rumah dengan industrial wastewater. Contoh kalau kita basuh baju, air mengalir ke satu takungan kan, jadi kita gunakan we use the protozoa such as ciliates ni, examples is the paramecium, or flagellates such as Euglenophyta and amoeba to feed on the particulates or such as suspended bacteria. Kalau dekat dalam loji kumbahan contohnya, kita gunakan Protista untuk makan bakteria-bakteria tu. Jadi bukan untuk guna semula air tu, tapi untuk supaya persekitaran kita punya environment kita tak terlalu berbau, air tu tak adalah teruk kotor sangat, so hidupan lain pun boleh hidup. So that's all for Protista. I hope it can give you more understanding, and see you in my next video. Thank you.